Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you get more information at our website, which is www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my guest in today's show, and she is Courtney Smith. And Courtney, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. So that's Courtney, and thanks for joining me. Courtney Smith started her career as a music therapist in the realms of both birth and death. These early experiences, along with her work as a certified nurse assistant, hospice volunteer, and trained death doula, as well as a 20-year career in social services, has inspired upon her the sacredness of the entire life cycle and the importance of community. She is supported by her lifelong practice of meditation, yoga, shamanic studies, and ancestry work. She currently facilitates and supports the emergence of the Center for Conscious Living and Dying through strategic planning and organizational development. And so the first question I have to ask you, and I ask my guest, Courtney, is as a young woman, you grew up where?
I actually am a native of Western North Carolina. My father was an English professor at Western Carolina University, and I grew up in Jackson County, North Carolina, in between Cullowhee and Cashiers, for those of you who are local listening.
And so growing up, did you always know you wanted to be a director for operations for a center for conscious living and dying?
I had no idea that I would end up here. When I was 4 years old, I saw Dr. Senichi Suzuki playing violins with 7, 8, and 9-year-olds, and they were all playing the Vivaldi violin concerto, and I was enthralled. And I told my mother I wanted to play the violin, and we live in a very rural area, and there were no violin teachers, and they couldn't really afford lessons. But I didn't, and I was 4 after all, so she figured I would forget about it soon enough, but I didn't. And a year later, I was still asking every Sunday, is this the week that I get my violin? And so when I turned 5, she went to the director of the music department at Western and said, please help me out. If there's no violin teachers, I've looked everywhere, I can't find one. If there's none, can you just tell my daughter I've done the best I can and there aren't any options? And he said, actually, we've just hired a new opera professor, Edgar Vom Lane, and I think his wife, Mrs. Sydney Vom Lane, is a retired Suzuki teacher. And so he got us in touch with them, and that's where I started playing the violin. And music really was my entrance into the world. I was a shy child, and I didn't talk a whole lot in public, but I would perform in public. I started performing. I did my first concert when I was 7 years old, and I would play, and it was really the voice that brought me and my own voice into the world.
You still play the violin?
I still play the violin. Before I played, I was classically trained first with the Suzuki method, and then I went on to graduate from high school at the North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem. And then I went to a university in Ohio, Baldwin Wallace University and Conservatory of Music. And I got a degree in music therapy there. And
you still have the first violin?
I still do. I do not have the first violin. I do not have it's tiny, little teeny tiny thing. I actually have my very first violin, which was a Kleenex box with a ruler taped to it. I've got that one, but I don't have the actual first one that had strings.
What's interesting is the fact that, so you studied as a young child. Did you ever want to become a professional violinist?
Yeah, so my mother wanted me to. She wanted me to be the next Itzhak Perlman or any of the other famous violinists of the time when I was growing up. And she took me to see the concerts, and we now go to the Asheville Symphony together. And when I was in high school, she was so devoted to this. She would pick me up from school and drive me an hour and a half to Asheville for my violin lesson, and she would sit and eat her dinner in the car and then drive me an hour and a half home, and I would eat my dinner on the way home. So she was very dedicated to this, and I got into the School of the Arts with
Right.
the very intention of becoming a violinist. But when I got there, I realized that the thing that I loved to do the most was to play in ensembles with other people, and that I didn't really, that being in a practice room for 6 hours or 8 hours a day all by myself wasn't really where my gregarious, extroverted self was most comfortable. And my violin teacher at the time said, I want you to meet my college roommate who's coming down to spend the weekend with me. And I'd love to invite you over to my house for dinner because I think you would really like to know what she does. And I said, what is that? And she said, well, first, if there was anything else that you could do other than play the violin, what would you want to do? And I said, I don't know, maybe something in medicine. And she said, I knew it. And so she said, my friend is a music therapist in the Cleveland area, and I want you to meet her. And so I went and had dinner at my teacher's house and met her friend. And when she started describing what she did, I was in. And so I ended up in Cleveland, Ohio for college. And when I started doing my internships, which you do relatively quickly in that degree program, one of the first internships that I did was with the Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. And I was working with Dr. DeForia Lane, who's a very well-known opera singer and also music therapist. And she ran the whole music therapy program in Cleveland at the Children's Hospital. And interestingly enough, I started out in labor and delivery and working on the children's oncology unit. And it was my job to help children who are really close to that life and death edge. They've just come from it. Life seems very full and very vibrant, and death or their beginning not that far away. And so when I worked with children, I was always amazed that they were very comfortable with the idea of death, and that the thing that worried them most was their parents. And so I would help them write songs to say goodbye to siblings and parents, and with their primary concern being that the people they were leaving behind would be okay.
By the way, the two folks you mentioned, if we can give them a shout out, are they still around, the teacher and then the person she introduced you to? Are they still around?
Neither my original violin teacher is not still teaching at the School of the Arts. She's not still around. And to be honest, I can't even remember the woman who she introduced me to by name. I just was so entranced by her stories. That she pointed me right in the right direction. But Dr. Foria Lane was my first mentor, and she, as far as I know, she is still at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, and she was a force to be reckoned with. She was phenomenal in all that she did and all she brought to that hospital.
But that's just so cool that they made such a difference in your life. Had you not met them, I guess, at the right time.
Yes.
It's curious how lives evolve.
Yes.
So you met these people, you started getting into the field, you studied it. What got you to Asheville?
So Asheville has always been home, and I went as far away as I could, as youngsters do sometimes, to find their own independence. And when I went to graduate school, I got a degree in community and agency counseling, and I worked with, continued to work with youth. I moved up in age a little bit, and I worked with juvenile delinquents, and I was a firefighter for a little while, and so that experience, and then working with juvenile delinquent boys, and getting into social services really taught me about how to work systems, and how I could do everything possible, that I was really, really calm in the face of a crisis, that I could be really the calm in the middle of any kind of a storm. And I began to realize that I really like storms. When I was little, my mother was always afraid I was going to die from being struck by lightning, because my first inclination in a storm was to be out in it, because I was so entranced by it. I loved to sit outside on the porch and run around in the rain. And so that idea of running into the storm, and stopping people from dying really was a part of my career for a very long time. And so even though I started in that death and dying and hospice space, I left it pretty quickly, because I was young and I wanted to do things, and I wanted to, make a difference. And it felt like too much of a slow pace for me. Eventually, I opened my own business, and I was training and consulting all over the country with Blue Spiral Consulting, which is still in existence and doing well. We worked all over with child welfare organizations, again, trying to prevent abuse and neglect from happening, and children from dying, and spouses from hurting each other. And at some point in time, I said to myself, I'm tired of trying to prevent people from dying. And my own father had passed. He'd gotten sick, and he'd had a 30-year practice of meditation, and a study and follower of Buddhism. And he really made an impact on my life. And he showed me how that calm in the interior really allowed me to understand that everything else around me was just weather, that I could be the sky, and everything else could be the weather that was just passing through, which is a phrase attributed to Pema Chodron. And so that his death, I didn't think I could live through, because he was my everything. I was a daddy's girl, and he had been my champion, and I just didn't want to be around without him. And yet his death and our conversations around it was perhaps the most incredible gift he ever gave to me and my family, my brother and my mother. And he was very intentional about it, and he was very calm about it. And we all gathered, his siblings and his nieces and nephews. And at the moment of his dying, my mother was wrapped in his arms, napping, and she woke to his last breath and brought us all out. Brought us into the room, and we read his poems and his favorite poems and our favorite poems, and for about an hour we had a poetry reading. And when that happened, I was so profoundly moved by how easy it was to just be with him and to be in this experience, even though it was sad and heart-wrenching. It was also incredibly beautiful. And it prompted me to go and get a certificate as a death doula, which I did with Anne-Marie Keppel out of Vermont. And she teaches a wonderful end-of-life death citizen course, because she believes that everybody has the right to and the remembrance that it's only a generation or two, maybe three ago, that we knew how to care for our elderly in our homes, and that we didn't move them away from us and relegate their bodies to funeral homes and things like that, that we held them and kept them close. And in doing so, taught the children who were around about that cycle of life, that it was a normal part of life. When we were agrarian society and we were dependent on agriculture and the movement of animals, that was a natural cycle of life. And as we've gotten busier, we've pushed that the end part away from us. And so his death really brought that back.
What's so cool about what you're talking about is the fact that not only me, but a lot of folks never think about this or never talk about it, and they don't talk about it, I guess, ever. And it's particularly relevant now in that I just had a friend of ours, a neighbor, passed, and he had dementia. But what was so touching about it was that he died in the home, and they were so adamant about that. They wanted him to be home with him. And in a sense, it was very lovely when you think about it, but not a lot of people do that,
Not a lot of people do.
Or don't even want to think about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, we actually all think about it. We just think it's going to happen to somebody else, not us.
Yeah. So I guess that ties into, I guess, the work you're doing now, and you have to tell me more about it. So I just, the minute I heard about it through a mutual friend, and I'll give her a shout out. Well, Layla Dabrowski, is it?
Yes.
Is a volunteer with your center.
She
and
is.
I just not love the name, but just really caught me when I first heard it. The Center for Conscious Living and Dying.
Yes.
And this is, now you telling me off the air, this is still not even open yet. It's going to open in January. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
But
yes.
for the benefit of the folks, including yours truly, who don't know what the Center for Conscious Living and Dying is, what is it?
Yeah. So the Center for Conscious Living and Dying is a nonprofit. We applied for and received our 501c3 in the fall of 2022. And it was the vision of Dr. Aditi Sethi, who, interestingly enough, was my father's doctor at Solace as he was passing. Dr. Aditi and I had known each other. She's also a musician, and I had teenage daughters, and they babysat. So we knew each other from the babysitting world and the music world. And I knew she was a doctor, but I didn't know that she was a palliative care doctor. And so she was working at Solace, and during COVID in 2021, a young man by the name of Ethan Sisser, who was dying of glioblastoma in Charlotte, North Carolina, was dying in a hospice all alone. And he was doing that because it was COVID and no one could go in, and he couldn't have friends and family around with him. And we were right in the middle of the pandemic, and he didn't want to die like that. And so he started using Facebook and other social media platforms to broadcast daily updates on his progress and what was happening to him. And enough people, followers, started to notice him that word got to Dr. Aditi, and that he wanted to die in community. And she'd always wanted to have a community, more of a community-focused death care in the home or in a home-like setting, like you're describing that your friend had. And so another friend offered his home for this young man to come, and Dr. Aditi pulled together a team of people, including Greg Lathrop, who is on our elder council here at the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, and others who are volunteers. If you go see the movie, you'll see lots of our volunteers there.
Which movie?
Yeah, so what Ethan Sisser wanted was for his last days to be documented so that everybody could see that it wasn't something to be shied away from. It was something to embrace. And so Scott Kirschenbaum, who is a documentary filmmaker, came and documented the last 14 days of Ethan Sisser's life. And he turned it into a movie called The Last Ecstatic Days. And your podcast listeners can go to the show notes and find the link to see that movie. It's coming up. There's going to be a showing actually this week of the movie. I think it's already sold out, but there are more showings coming up. And so they can go to the elasticstaticdaysmovie.com and find out more information about that. And so, go
No,
ahead.
you have to say, what a great title for a movie too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so Ethan's goal was to show the whole world that dying can be yet one more adventure, a journey on life's path from the moment that you know into your very last breath. And it can be a gift to all of the people who participate in it and all the people who are a part of it, if you so choose to hold it close enough that it can help you understand that living life fully is really accentuated when we realize that life isn't guaranteed, that it's short and it could end at any moment.
And I
So,
guess what you're saying though is very cool too. The fact that you can also live life fully, but it'd be great if you could also die living fully.
that's right.
And most people, I guess, don't do that, or it just sort of happens.
Well, we sort of wake up and we have breakfast and we go through our day and then we have dinner and we go to bed and we wake up and we do the whole thing over again. And it's a series of setting goals for ourselves and reaching those goals and doing the things on our to-do lists and paying our bills and keeping our homes up or having some time with friends. And all of those things are great. And when you hold death closely, it really accentuates every single moment of your life. Since I have been working at the center, and I want to go back and answer your question, what it is, because I didn't get to that. It's really changed who I am. It's changed who I am in relation to absolutely every single relationship in my life. My husband and I recently took a lifelong dream trip that I'd always wanted to go to South Africa since I was in high school, and we did. And before we left for the trip, both of my daughters, who've just recently launched, they're in their early 20s, I sat down with each one of them and looked them into their eyes and I said, I love you. You are ready for this world. You have everything that you need. And if I were not to come back from this trip, I want you to know I will always be beside you, no matter what, if I'm in physical form or otherwise. And they got choked up. And it's those moments that I don't let go by anymore, that I say all the things that I really want to say to the people that I love. And actually, it's now extended because one of Ethan's phrases was say yes to a stranger, because the people in this movie said yes to him and they didn't even know him. And so now I'll be walking down the street and I'll stop and speak to strangers. It changes your whole perspective when you are in close proximity to death.
Will this
So
film,
that's
I'm sorry, will the film hopefully be on Amazon or Netflix, you think?
yeah, they're in the process of
Great.
finding a distributor right now, and we are a educational partner with them, the primary educational partner. So it will definitely be shown around. And if you go to that website, their website, you'll be able to see the progress that they're making and getting a distributor. And so yes, absolutely, it'll be. There's lots of showings coming up in the area, so check it out and you'll be able to see it.
And fast forward if you would, though. So I'm getting bits and pieces of this, what the center is.
Yeah.
So how does it then go from the bits and pieces into something that's going to open up in January?
Sure. So the Center for Conscious Living and Dying has three main branches. We have this beautiful oak tree, grandmother oak, that's over a century old in our front yard. And those branches are how I like to picture the center. The first branch is the conscious living piece. The Center for Conscious Living comes before the conscious dying, even in our name. We have over 200 volunteers. And when we have a process to go through to become a volunteer, and those volunteers are becoming a volunteer because they want to be a member of an intentional community that is committed to service and building authentic relationships and having a spiritual practice with death. The second piece is the second branch of what we offer is the conscious dying piece. And that is, we are in the process right now, which is why we're not quite open yet, of transforming our lower level into an Omega home. So we'll be one of the only Omega home in the National Omega Home Network that's located in North Carolina. And the Omega Home Network is a conglomerate of open sourced family care, community-based homes that provide 24-hour care for anyone who has a diagnosis of 2 months or less, that is paired up with hospice to provide medical care. And then the volunteers provide the 24/7 care in a home-like setting. So we will have 3 people in residence with us at any one time, up to 3 people. And we have about 100 volunteers that we need to run those shifts, so that there'll be 2 people on at all times, 2 or 3 people on at all times, and they will be caring for all 3 of the residents that are here under our care.
So the residents who are there, they're actually going through the hospice experience at your place? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so they're going, we are surrogate family members. So their family members can come and stay here with us. We have an Airbnb on our upper levels. On our main floor and our second floor, we have Airbnb rooms. So family members, even from out of town, can come and stay with their loved ones. Or if they're local, they can just drive back and forth. And they come and they have a prognosis of 2 months or less to live, and a terminal diagnosis, and they have to have hospice. So we are not a hospice provider. Hospice provides the medical care for those residents who are in our physical care.
Now, this model is kind of interesting. Is this done elsewhere, or it's been done elsewhere?
We are one of 40 something. There were, the last time I looked, there were 41 or 42 Omega homes in the country. And it's a model that allows for communities to provide care for people no matter what their situation. And what's unique about it is that it costs nothing to the person who is in our care, because the conscious living piece is surrounding these dying souls with people who want to be in close proximity and welcoming death and welcoming the experience of seeing how life is so precious.
Now, you mentioned there are 3 aspects to this. I think we got the first 2. What was the
And
third
the
one?
third one is the education branch. And so the educational branch is that we provide our conscious living community with all kinds of resources, from classes to people who can do notarizing of their end-of-life documents, to workshops on how to put together your end-of-life documents, to workshops on what would be your best 3 months if you knew you only had 3 months left to live, to workshops and musical events and all kinds of things that enhance the lives of our community members. We also have a doula program, an end-of-life doula program.
These programs will be available to the public? Is that
yes, they will be available to there's on our website. If you go to www.ccld.community, That's our website. And what you'll notice is if you scroll down onto the website, you'll see that there's a lot of events that are happening constantly. We have musical events and classes and workshops and grief circles and caregiving circles. So some of the events are open to the public and some of the events are specifically for our members. And so you'll be able to see all of those on the website. Right
So-
now, we are not accepting any new members unless you would like to become a donor member. So a donor member donates $300 and then you can come in quickly and then go through the process to become a volunteer. And then we're going to open up our volunteer option for people to apply to become volunteers again in the fall, later in the fall, probably end of October. We wanted to make sure that all of our current volunteers have gotten training and all of the attention and connection that they need so that they can be on a team. So we're run by volunteers and we have team leads. Walela is one of those team leads, your friend.
By the way, we'll give a shout out. I don't know if we mentioned her
LD.
name. Wilela Dabrowski
And Walela is the groundskeeper, the sanctuary groundskeeper. And we have 6 acres and she and her team of volunteers weed and plant and design beds and mulch and trim fruit trees that are on the property and all of those things. And we have other teams like our sanctuary team. Wanda Barnes runs our sanctuary team, and that's our main house building. And she and her team provide the loving care of cleaning and making the spaces beautiful. We have people who bring flower donations and put flowers all around. We have a tool time team who does upkeep for us, and if a door handle gets broken, they'll come and fix it. And so there's so many ways. We have a justice and equity and diversity team. There's so many ways that you can be involved in meaningful service-driven ways. And what's interesting about that is the American Medical Association just put out an article back in 2022 saying that one of the best predictors of mental health for those in an aging population is involvement in service and involvement in a community. And so that's one of the things that we offer to our community who are seeking a spiritual way to be in the rest of their lives, and in a way that doesn't ask them to just sit and become old, but invites them to continue to give their gifts in ways that they really enjoy. And so people who might not even enjoy cleaning their own house love to come and dust the counters here on Saturdays, or put events together. If they've never done that before, they might really enjoy that now. Or we have one volunteer who's a couple of volunteers right now who are working on seeking grants for funding for us. So there's so many ways to serve, and it is such a gratifying experience to be involved in that and know that it's not only doing good for this community, but that you get something out of it, and that it allows you as an aging or older adult to have purpose and to really thrive and shine, that you don't have to get softer and slower and be forgotten. You can be vibrant all the way to the very end.
Incredible is that so many people haven't even heard about this. You said you have 200 volunteers and it's not even going to be open until January. How did they hear about it, or how did they get involved in this?
That is the $1 million question. The people who are involved in CCLD come to us through the most circuitous and connected routes. And you'll hear people sharing stories of serendipity all the time about, I met him and he told me about her, and then I got here. And so those stories of connection, of weaving together, almost like a tapestry, is what we're building here. A tapestry of people who are connected by the passion that they have felt, and that then someone tells them about, and then they want to be a part of it. And once you get involved in it, it's hard, it's kind of intoxicating. There's so much happening here, and it offers you so many opportunities to be authentically yourself that it's hard to stay away.
So if you can repeat again, if folks are interested in finding out, I guess, two things. One, to find out more about the center, best bet is to go to the website. And again, if you could repeat it.
Yeah. So the website is CCLD, which stands for Center for Conscious Living and Dying, .community. And you can scroll down to the end of that website, and there's a place for you to subscribe to our newsletter, and you'll get our newsletter, and that'll keep you up to date on all the things that are happening. We can only do what we do because of generous donations, and our community has been incredibly generous. Our members, we have about 180 individuals so far this year who have given, and 55 people are donating monthly, which gives us an annual $20,000 a year that we can count on. What we know from the Omega Home Network is that many of the families who will come here to accompany their loved ones' last days will offer us pay it forward donations, and that those donations generally create about 30% of our annual budget. But we are dependent on grants and donations. And so on our website, the www.ccld.community, you can go on and come and stay with us in one of our Airbnb rooms. Our property is absolutely stunning. We're in the Swannanoa Valley, and we look out, as I look to my left here, I can look out over the Swannanoa Valley and see the Blue Ridge Mountains. And we have 3 Airbnb rooms that are available to rent. And if you're here visiting a student at Warren Wilson College, we have a lot of Warren Wilson student volunteers, so we have multi-generational communities here on campus, often many days a month. And if you're coming to visit or coming for the holidays, you can come and stay with us, and that's one way to support us. Another way to support us is to get onto our website or onto our newsletters and follow the link, and we have an Amazon wish list, and you can send us things that we need. And as we grow as a community, we also grow in generosity. And so that's how we can offer these incredible services, which involve music and loving touch and 24-hour care at absolutely no cost to the resident or their family coming in.
Final question, Courtney. I'm very excited that it's going to be opening in January. But is that eventually going to be a problem for people? You know, you can only house 3 folks at a time. Do they get on a waiting list, or how does that open up that there'll be one of the 3?
Yeah, so one of the things that happens here is that we do have pretty strict guidelines about coming in, that this isn't a long-term care facility. Obviously, it's a last days, and so oftentimes those stays are short, so 2 months or less. There is an intake process that's pretty extensive, and we are seeking those folks who really want to die in this intentional way, and also have their family or friends, or even people who are unhoused. We take anyone, no matter who you are or what, and there's the process to hierarchical process of who gets in based on the greatest need, and And we hope that eventually we already have 7 legacy donors, and a legacy donor is someone who has put us in their will for property or a house or whatever. And so with that money, we hope to create a foundation that is sustaining and supporting, and we could build additional units and expand our growth eventually.
Good stuff, Courtney Smith. I want to thank you for teaching me, if you will, about the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. And wish you luck. I guess, Jen, do we have an official start date in January?
We don't have an official start date. We are in the middle of our work in the renovation process of those 3 rooms. And as soon as those are finished, then we can set a date. So we're hoping, we're well underway in our construction, and we're hoping those will be built out soon. And as soon, but we can't really set a date until we know we have the rooms finished. So we're really excited about that. And we're really excited about being partners with Elastic Static Days, education partners with them. And so check out the Elastic Static Days movie.com and ccld.community. Become one of our subscribers. If you're local and in the area, check out all of our events upcoming and sign up for one of our workshops, or apply or donate and become a member.
Well, keep me in the loop, especially when you open, because we'll have to come on board January, February when we're officially open. We'll also maybe do a kind of walking tour of the facility. I'd love to see it, and we can show that on a podcast.
Yeah, that would be great.
It would. I'm just very excited about it. I wish you a lot of luck with the program. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, for helping with today's show. And like I said, we hope to see you sometime in the future at the center. So lots of luck with it, Courtney. Thanks again.
Thank you.